how you're chosen and how brilliant you are and you have special abilities and we're going to give you secrets and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I grew up in LA. Secrets are usually down a back alley and it smells like dead hookers and heroin. So I don't like secrets. And the last time I was astral kidnapped, I've been getting the shit beat out of me for 35 years. I don't really trust you guys either. Like, why are you violating me by pulling me out of my body? So they weren't flattering to me because I'd already had so many years of attack. I never want to leave my body again, ever. No, thank you. As a matter of fact, when I die, I'm not even leaving. My soul is not even leaving Earth when I die. Okay. I'm not going to a light. I'm not running towards Jesus in a meadow. Here is what I've told them. I've said to God, here's what's happening with me. I want Davidic covenant SWAT team to come down and literally escort me to the kingdom. And if I don't have Davidic paperwork, like, I'm checking their credentials, right? You send someone, I'm testing that spirit. I'm asking them who they serve. I'm grilling them and I'm putting them through the test of the spirit. I want to see their paperwork because I ain't going with anybody except my Davidic SWAT team. I will haunt the local Applebee's before I will go with a random light or a happy meadow. Okay. I want my Davidic team and I want to check the paperwork. Hi, and welcome to our Bible study channel.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. To all those in this session, all of those who are listening, don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.
These are videos that go pretty in depth. First thing you should probably do is pause and read our 12 rules for reading biblical text. And if you don't like the 12 rules, or you don't understand the 12 rules, well, I don't have time to explain them all. Go back to the book that I wrote and uploaded on this channel, which takes you through the entire arc and how we made these quote-unquote 12 rules as a framework of what we found after 7 years digging meticulously and carefully through the text. So if you're confused, go do that. If I refer back, well, that's probably because we actually post these things in order. So they're all done in series. And if you jump in at the middle of a series without any schema or background knowledge, and you get all pissed off, well, that's also not our problem. This is a group where we go line by line, scroll by scroll through the text. Warning, we are not language sensitive. So if you can't handle some cussing, it's not the place for you. We also do not endorse nor approve of pretty much any mainstream theology. So if you're looking for that, also definitely not the place for you. We do a video about the characters that we use in our Bible study series. And the reason we do this is sort of so that they can kind of get in your head. So we do have a video explaining why we chose the people we chose and how their sort of energy characteristics go along with the biblical characters to modernize it for people so they know what the heck we're reading. Clearly, the Roman Church was not doing their job and looking for the lost sheep of the reunited House of David. So that's what we're doing, okay? We're taking that away from them because they screwed it up. The brilliant rabbis also down there in Babylon are also not looking for the lost sheep of the reunited kingdom of David. So you're not going to hear let's follow Rome. And you're not going to hear, let's follow the rabbis on this channel. Because, sorry, not sorry, but the Bible wasn't actually written for the corrupt Levitical priesthood post-Babylon and Persia to read it through their little janky books. And it also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of pagan 4th century church fathers. So we're not doing that either. You guys can both have a seat. Oddly enough, the Bible also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of some dumbass scholars with pieces of paper that say they're smarter than everyone, but have never seen a Davidic covenant in their life. Not written for them either. You know who it's written for? It's written for the reunited house of David, who are actually in covenant and are actually the sheep. That's who it's written for. That's why nobody else can understand what the heck's going on. What you are going to hear is what you're supposed to hear, which is, let's follow the king. And let's get started.
So, we are going to war. Yes.
Hello. We are kind of starting. I'm dropping this out of context video, but it looks like it would be something to return to in the future, particularly as we dig a little bit deeper in our Paul's Paganism series. So it seemed like just a really interesting place to drop this, although it doesn't really fit anywhere. It sort of fits everywhere. So let's go. This kind of was inspired, if you will, from a comment that I got yesterday or the day before. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And I hope that this person doesn't mind me reading it out like this. But it was, thanks for the video, much food for thought. And then here was the question. Do you believe the Tetragrammaton is the true name of God? Or maybe it replaced something else in order to not make it target or blasphemy? I heard Dr. Asher said they intentionally hid the right name of God in order to hide it from pagans. And since the occult uses Tetragrammaton, I totally understand the need to do that. The YHWH source often sounds well and like God who Jesus preached, especially compared to the priestly source. It's also older. So I find there a discrepancy. On one hand, scholars say the Tetragrammaton was possibly the name of a desert storm god. And on the other hand, you've got the YHWH as a good source overall. So any theories about this beyond the possibilities? There is indeed a verse in the Old Testament about El and the Tetragrammaton as possibly El's subordinate divinity. I have a theory on that verse, but again, my speculation. What's your understanding? Well, well, that's a big one. There's a couple of things here that I immediately thought about. Those are two really deep level questions. And we haven't gone down the name of God rabbit hole. I've mentioned it in several places, but like not, just dropping nuggets, right? I have a hard time staying on topic because everything leads to everything else. So I thought I would kind of hit this head on. And I'm going to give you the easy answer, my easy answer, and then I'm going to give you a deeper answer as to why my easy answer is my easy answer. Okay? For those out there, I know my audience is a vast experience. Because we started in a private study group, we have background knowledge and experience on all levels. So I try to kind of spiral that curriculum. So I'm going to take a minute and explain this question to people who may not know what this means. Okay, the Tetragrammaton is those capital letters, right? The capital letters that many people claim is the true name of God, which is pronounced Yahweh. But if you take out the vowels, that's called the Tetragrammaton. And the question is that real? Is Yahweh real? Is that the real way to pronounce it? Is that the real name of God, or has it been hidden? Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. And this got it really kind of pumped up in the last, I don't know, few years. This has really gotten a fervor online. Anything from you're worshiping Satan to, is God Yahweh and who's Yahweh and is Baal and all these other gods. And the scholars are in there. I think this also came when Michael Heiser got very popular. And so a lot of Christians have switched over from Lord, God, to, at first it was Jehovah, and then they kind of switched to Yahweh. And there's a big, big, big Yahweh movement out there among scholars and among a lot. I'm going to, I hate to categorize, but I got to do what you got to do, right? Just to keep it moving. A lot of the Hebrew rootsy kind of movements that are, and these are people who are trying to connect with God, with the real God, and trying to build that understanding as they're coming out of, we'll call it glamored Rome, right? So they're kind of leaving Rome, and they're like, let's go back to the roots. Let's go back to the original apostles, the original faith, and dig into the Old Testament. Because, for generations, Christians were told, just don't worry about the Old Testament, that's done. And these things are shifting. And so a lot of that shift, there is a big Yahweh movement. And I put the Yahweh question squarely into the camp of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying it is or isn't the same entity. What I'm saying is when I go onto YouTube or Rumble or wherever you go, Facebook, X, whatever social media platforms, Google searches even, and you start to see an overwhelming, I'm going to just call it a marketing campaign for something, an idea, right? A branding. I look at it with suspicion. That's the first thing. So the second question is, he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know, but they're asking about this theory, right? The documentary theory, I think it's called, that documentary hypothesis. And this is talking about, it's a pretty old established theory that goes around in scholar land and seminaries and that sort of thing, that there were different factions, if you will, contributing to the makeup of the scrolls of the Bible. So there's the priestly source came in, and that faction kind of wrote their things. And then you've got an editor in between trying to make it all cohesive. And then you've got the Yahweh source. And so there's these different, the Deuteronomy. So you've got these different factions who are coming in with their version of the story. We touch on this at like a really kindergarten level in our history shorts series. So if you have no idea what that means, maybe go there for like a brief kindergarten overview of what that theory says. And there's two things that I find interesting to note in this question. And those two things that I picked up on kind of led my brain way too far down a rabbit hole. So I want to point those out. The first, there's an assumption. And the assumption is right here. Dr. Asher said they intentionally hid the right name to hide it from pagans. That is a giant theory, and it's true, and there's historical backings to that, and that's a whole rabbit hole in itself on how they removed the name. But the interesting assumption behind this theory is that the name they removed was right to begin with. Does that make sense? That they removed the name, the correct name, to hide it from pagans. But that's assuming that the name that the Babylonian priesthood, that their God, regardless of what the name was or wasn't, that their God was the correct one. That's the first assumption. And they hid that God's name. The second assumption is that the authors, the modern authors of the Masoretic text, based on rabbinical tradition, are also addressing the correct God, regardless of if they hid the name or didn't hide the name. Is that group of people following the same God that is Jesus's father? That's the real question here. The hiding is a layer above that question. You've got to first trust them that the ancient folks running around in those days had the right name of God to begin with, had the right God to begin with, that they were following the right one. And I'm not so sure about that. But we'll get a little deeper into that. The second one is I actually like the I don't even know how to say it, documentary hypothesis. I actually like that. But it's one more piece of the puzzle, and there's a lot more overlay onto that. So I think one of the dangers of the documentary hypothesis, which is also one of the dangers of a lot of the scholarly work that we have to dig through to try to figure out what the hell's going on, right? And so we go down these giant scholarly rabbit holes of edits and redactions and scrolls putting together. And at the end of the tunnel, my goal is to find my covenant. Okay, that's my goal. Other people have different goals. And there is a piece missing in academia that it makes an assumption that when my girls were little, my girls are in their young 20s now, but when my girls were little, our family rule was assume goodwill. So if they would argue with each other or there would be a misunderstanding in the family, I would always look at the little ones, when they were little tiny, teeny, cute things. And I'd say, okay, everybody needs to assume goodwill. This is also a good kind of rule of thumb to bring into the workplace, right? Or to bring into relationships. Assuming goodwill works wonderfully within close personal relationships, jobs, and family. But I've learned because of my experience, which many people, I've never found someone with my experience yet. I'm still looking. But it doesn't work for me because of my experience. Assuming goodwill does not work for me. It gets me eaten alive by demons. So I don't want to do that. So I think there is an assumption of goodwill among the public that is overlaid on the scholars who are doing this work. Let me say that. And they may be nefarious. They may be willfully blind. They may be mistaken. They may be paid off and sold out. They may be a whole lot of things. But what they tend to do is scholars like to make things nice and neat and put them into a box. So let's just say that the YHWH source is a decent source, right? And it seems to match. What's missing is the scholar assumptional worldview that the supernatural realm is irrelevant and that the people compiling the YHWH source did not have nefarious motives to begin with, or someone who came in later and edited it to fix some stuff didn't overlay corruptions on top of it, or that they were correct to begin with. Does that make sense? So I think it goes a little deeper, and the danger of making those quick assumptions of categories is where I tend to hesitate. So with that in mind, we're going to move on and answer the question of what do I think? And I don't normally talk about my own personal beliefs on this channel because I don't see it as my job to save souls. I don't see it as my job to tell anyone else what to believe. If I have a job at all, it is informed consent. And that is honestly secondary to jurisdictional grid cast warfare. And we're going to talk about what that means and why you're seeing these videos to begin with. But it's definitely, I'm not a saving souls Christian. I put information out, agree or disagree, but I want people to have informed consent based on contract law. That's what I'm doing. I'm sharing a different perspective. I'm sharing a ritualized occult perspective. I'm sharing insights from my experience in this realm, if you will, and insights to my covenant that I chose to join. And I'm trying to simultaneously uncover the truth of my covenant, the truth of the ritual occult overlays embedded in biblical and extra biblical text that can explain my lifelong experience, which I'm still piecing together, those trauma pieces, and putting it together and learning new things every day, like, oh, that's why that happened. And then also informing others on that journey of the things that I'm learning and telling them about my covenant, because maybe the covenant that I'm in is right for them too. But I'm not going to assume that, because I'm not going to assume that I'm correct. I'm more interested in being accurate than I am in being right. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today too. Accuracy is more important to me than being right. And so that's sort of different than usual. So let's look at ritual. Rituals are not neutral, okay? They're either override coded, which means one thing is overriding another. And override, sometimes I use this differently, but generally when I say override, I'm talking about Davidic override. Or it's possession code. And when I say possession code, I don't mean like horror movie, you're possessed. I mean taking possession of jurisdictional authority, taking possession of something that's not yours. Space, land, inheritance, sovereignty, dominion. You're taking that space in jurisdictional warfare. In Mystery Babylon, which is we'll talk about who I think Mystery Babylon is in a minute, reframes this ritual as covenant. And they're making covenants outside of legal jurisdiction. So the Davidic override collapses ritual infrastructure by presence, not performance. Anyone who can hear my voice, write that down and meditate on that, okay? In my experience in the occult attack world, the Davidic override covenant, okay? It collapses infrastructure, ritual-made infrastructure, by their presence, not by their performance. This leads into Exodus plagues, which leads back to Psalm 73, which is what we were just studying. And I want you to write that down and keep it in mind as we continue today. I'm going to make another statement. Theology is based on worldview, and worldview is based on theology. Okay? Realities, or what I call kingdoms, are constructed by ritual and override. And we're going to get a little woo-woo here today. Okay? So I want you guys to think quantum. I want you to think interdimensional layers. I want you to think simulation. I want you to think hologram. Okay, and we're going to say this again. Realities, or what I call kingdoms, are constructed by ritual and override. So when people come to my channel, they're going to get a lot of the same information that you might have heard other places, but you're also going to get a different lens. And it may feel comfortable, it may feel uncomfortable. But that's because thus far, the channels that I've looked at, explored, the information I've gotten through the scholars, anybody out there speaking, are speaking from the perspective of salvation and ritual. Their goal is salvation. This concept of salvation. And quite honestly, I've been through so many Christian denominations trying to solve my occult issue that I was born with, basically. I still can't tell you what they mean by salvation. What are you salvationing from? Well, they save you from sin. Sin is a desire. Sin is a choice. Sin is a temptation by the enemy. James says sin comes from your own desires. You don't want an override for your own desire. Like, I don't understand that. Well, no. They're saving you from the consequence of your sin. So now I can sin without consequence. Well, no. And it keeps changing and evolving. Well, they're saving you from damnation. But hell is not biblical. They glitch out with this idea of salvation. But everyone's goal is basically to get to heaven. Does that make sense? And very good people are out in the world trying to get a relationship with God. They're seeking God in a heartfelt way. There are others who are not really seeking God because they believe they already found him. And both of those groups are involved in what I call ritual. My channel doesn't focus. My focus is not salvation. It's not my business to save your soul. That's insanely arrogant. What I've seen some shit. I've seen some shit out there in the multidimensional zones. I've been astral attacked multiple dozens of times, if not in the hundreds. So it's not like a one thing that happened to me. This was a lifelong battle. I've had near-death experiences with out-of-body NDEs. I've had out-of-body experiences. I've had all kinds of different supernatural shit, the poltergeist shit. I've seen it all out there, and it's quite traumatic. And I've seen this as my worldview from the gate. So I've never known. I mean, I want you to sit with this. I have most people. They're like, oh, I astral projected when I was 15. I had sleep paralysis when I was 22 one time, or I took an ayahuasca hit and I went into this universe. And it changed their whole life. And you can go on, and find videos where that's true. These people are like, oh my gosh, it changed my whole worldview. Sit for a minute and imagine a worldview where you never didn't have that. From my first memory, being a part of etheric, astral, poltergeist, beatdowns by entities you can't see, that's normal to me, okay? I didn't have a night for over 40 years where I went to bed not expecting to be completely attacked. So what people see as normal is brand new to me for the last 7 or 8 years. And to what people think is supernatural is my natural default. So I know occult. I know the grid system. I know the astral system. I've been there. I didn't have the words to decode it. I didn't have the occult upbringing in my family to understand what was happening to me. If I would have gone to my family, like, oh, you're just having nightmares, suck it up. Like, it was one of those. This is nothing that I was able to find. And because it started in the 70s and 80s, there was no information out there about this crap. So you're alone. You're alone and left to suffer. Recently, people are becoming more aware of this. And it's not like ashamed and embarrassed to speak up about it. And that has a lot to do with the internet. And the entities have also, what I believe, have changed tactics. People of my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, we just got the shit beat out of us and everyone called us crazy. The newer generations are having these magical experiences. Because the information's out now. They're getting caught. Like, okay, we got caught being assholes. People are admitting this is happening. We better change our tactics and sweeten the deal. That's how I'm seeing it from my perspective. So when I'm talking about biblical text, I'm seeing it from that perspective, but I'm also seeing it as from a covenant and override perspective. where most people are out there looking for salvation and following ritual, I'm out here in biblical text trying to find my covenant. I'm like, I know it's in there. I'm in a covenant. I love my covenant. I'm never leaving my covenant. I'm scared to die. I will never leave my covenant. That's not happening. But I also want to really know and understand the terms and conditions of my covenant. I want to know who Team David is. I want to understand how this has impacted my life and my history and my family. I want to understand the correct ways to walk. This is what I call the David protocol. So I'm digging out my covenant from erasure. Does that make sense? And I'm also doing that to make sure that I don't breach my own covenant. Like, I don't want to go the wrong direction and step out of covenant and lose the Davidic override and be back out there as shark bait. So I'm doing this from sort of a survivalist perspective and from a very, very different worldview where the supernatural was my default. Does that make sense? So you might hear things a little bit differently here, and that's going to change my opinion and my personal theology and the way I present things and what I look for when I'm scanning the text. So keep that in mind. This is why I don't say I'm right. I do get very harsh when people come to argue with me because I'm like, that's not my covenant. Go away. I don't want to debate Christians because Christians are not in my covenant. Does that make sense? I want to learn from Christians, from some of them, because they have good information. But don't confuse that with agreeing with their covenant. Does that make sense? Same with rabbis. I can learn from rabbis and pick up information here and there, but I don't trust them. They're not in my covenant. So I'm not taking theological advice from them. I'm picking up nuggets of information to piece together my own covenant and my own ideas. Does that make sense? I'm building my covenant. I'm building my theology from the covenant, not the other way around. So I don't want anybody around me. I'm like, no, I'm not going to argue with you. You go, ascend, have fun. You go Hebrew roots, Yeshuaing all day long. You have fun with that. Not my covenant. You go rabbi out, not my covenant. You can listen to the scholars and do Gnostic atheist stuff, not my covenant. You can go do Christian stuff, not my covenant. Welcome home to Rome Catholic Church, not my covenant. Don't argue with me from a place of your covenant and your salvation and ritual worldview, because I'm looking at it differently. And so that's why I'm not really like, you have to do this and you have to believe that. You don't. What do I know? I think it's very arrogant to do that. I think the whole idea of conversion is extraordinarily arrogant. Because most religious folks, or spiritual folks for that matter, are operating on emotion, whereas I'm operating on loyalty to a covenant. Very different. They're operating on belief. I'm operating from a lens of what is legal. And I don't mean legal like Levitical law legal. I mean quantum jurisdictionally legal. That's what I mean. Doesn't matter what you believe. I always tell people, don't give a shit what you believe. Jurisdictional covenant override in the kingdom of David does not operate on belief. It operates on jurisdiction. It's legal. They're not checking beliefs. Now, belief matters if it leads you to behave a certain way and make alternate contracts and follow false gods. You want to behave in a way that's loyal to the covenant. And if you don't know what the covenant is, you don't understand the laws of the covenant, you're going to get out of bounds. But this is not, so your beliefs can definitely throw you off track for sure. And that's what they're actually using. I mean, I was thrown off track for 40 fucking years by the entire Christian church. So belief doesn't work. It's, this idea of just believe harder. When I was being attacked for all those decades, the church answer was basically, you just don't have the Holy Spirit. You're just somehow, it's a problem with you. You've been rejected. Believe harder. There must be something you're not doing right or thinking right. It was never even doing. It was always, you're not thinking enough. You're not kind enough. You're not, you're saying the wrong words. It goes to sin and behavior and shame and guilt. And well, she must not really believe this, and this. but it's a victim blaming because they couldn't help me because they were in the wrong contract. Like if anyone just would have said, hey, have you tried the Davidic covenant? I'd be like, what's that? Nobody offered it. You see what I mean? It was just believe harder in the Trinity. Just do that. Believe harder in Paul. Didn't work for me. So this whole emotional and belief system, I'm very cautious with belief. Their system works on consent, whether informed consent or manipulated consent, where my lens works on what's valid. What's valid. And then consent to what's valid rather than what your beliefs or emotions tell you to do. So just from that, now we've got a heaven and earth and hell. Okay. This is the general, like this is the best I can do with how I imagine Christians imagine the world, right? There's a heaven dimension, there's an earth dimension, there's a hell dimension, and earth is the center of it all, right? And what this is, this vision of the world in religious, and you can go and ask them, about simulation theory and dimensions, and they'll get it. But when it comes to biblical, theological beliefs, this is kind of where the brain is. I found it to be a very material-centric view. And when I say material-centric, I mean very Newtonian physics, right? And it's very political. What are the politicians doing? What's happening in Israel? What's Trump passing now? What is the church doing? How many hours did I volunteer at the soup kitchen today? What are the banking industry happening? Well, how are my finances doing? I was kind to my neighbor by making them a casserole. It's very Newtonian earth system and politically focused. Does that make sense? They have a view of heaven and hell, which assumes a guaranteed afterlife. I was never had the luxury of assuming a guaranteed afterlife because the entities that attacked me from a very young age promised me soul death. There is nothing I can think of that I've been through in this lifetime than demonic-ish. I just call them demonic. It's just, I know it's not really, they're not demons, but whatever they are, entities. We call them that because everybody understands that term. It's a simplified term. These demonic entities guaranteed me that I was going to be extinguished because they had jurisdictional authority to do that. I was theirs. They owned me. They owned me. That's what they were telling me. They didn't use that words, but it was impressed on me that I was theirs. There was a connotation of ownership, which is a connotation of jurisdiction. Okay. Now, of course, I'm unable to articulate that when I'm 5 or even 25 and arguably even 45 before I reversed the Pauline baptism and went into Davidic baptism. I still wasn't able to articulate these things, and I'm still piecing them together because other people just don't relate to me. And sometimes it helps to talk things out. But if you don't have anyone to talk it out with, they're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Heaven, earth, hell view of Christianity and other religions is words-based. Say the right words, do the right things, believe the right stuff. Belief-based, emotion-based. In earthly life is the center of everything. As much as they want to believe and understand and grasp that this isn't all there is, it's a whole nother playbook when you've seen it. Does that make sense? It's like explaining dimensional warfare to people who have never seen it. Is like explaining color to a blind person, if you will. It just doesn't work. There's no words for it. You have to be there to get it. So I don't even blame them for this view. If it's all you know, it's all you have. We don't know what we don't know. Does that make sense? But my worldview has always been from birth very, very different. Here's what I see. We've got the Davidic kingdom in the middle, okay? That I didn't understand what that was, right, prior to the Davidic covenant. But I guess people would describe this as heaven. I don't describe it as heaven. The words of the Bible is the heavens. And I don't use the word heaven on purpose because I'm trying to make a distinction between heaven and the Davidic kingdom. To let people know I'm speaking of something different than what Christianity has taught or your major Abrahamic religions has taught. And then the green that you see it's a grid. It is a quantum, moving, no space-time. Look up Einstein in the ether. If you can get your head around the torus spiral with Einstein in the ether, you're starting to understand the grid. Okay? And Earth sort of torus spirals within this grid system. And you've got the kingdom in the center of all, not Earth in the center of all. And this is the Davidic kingdom. And there's I had AI build me a little brick wall around that kingdom because you ain't getting in unless you're in covenant. Outside of that kingdom, you have the realm of outer darkness. And then you've got astral realms. Okay. And they might be negative and ugly, like the one with the star on it at the bottom. And they might be lovely, like a field and a meadow. But they're still false constructs made with holographic data and empowered through consent and ritual. This is the grid that I've seen my whole life. And this is the place I was taken to. I couldn't describe it because you can't articulate what it's like trying to read a word you've never seen. You just don't know what it is, right? But this captures the places I've been since childhood. Now, with that in mind, this operates on natural law, not Newtonian law. We do a little bit on natural law in the book and how these secret societies and occult groups utilize natural law against the population. But there's other people who have talked about that way better than I can. This is a quantum dimensional overview, which I didn't even hear the word quantum till 10 years ago. So I didn't have words to articulate it, but it's definitely a quantum multi-dimensional view. It operates on frequency. Frequency has a lot to do with it. And manipulating frequencies to build these holographic systems, if you will, and to attack and to scramble nervous systems. Go look at the science behind all that. And it's legal. It operates on law. And when I say law, most people think 10 commandments, Levitical law, right? Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. That's not what I mean. Rabbinic law. No. I mean covenant law, courtroom law, jurisdictional authority. Hasatan is the accuser in court. For a little taste of this, go to the courts of heaven guy. He talks about this in the courts of heaven. I don't agree and recommend theology from anybody. I recommend pieces to research and go, oh, that's interesting. He does a lot with he overdoes the courts of heaven. I don't agree with his, I don't agree with his method. He's Pauline, let's put it that way. But he's got a piece. And I don't necessarily agree with his conclusions that he draws from the information that he's figured out. But the information itself, he's in the ballpark, let's put it that way. And you can get an understanding if you haven't looked at him. To the legal framework that I'm talking about. It's very similar to that. It deals with contract law and what ritual contracts and consents are opened or not opened in your case file, if you will. It deals with consent, either manipulated or explicit, informed or not informed. And so while others are talking about quote unquote spiritual warfare, I use that word because people understand what I'm saying. But what I'm really engaged in is dimensional, jurisdictional warfare. I'm reclaiming space from the enemy by following contract law under legal authority within the only legally recognized covenant. Put all those words together. I couldn't even say that all again. But that's what's going on out there. And I can tell you that the presence of Team David collapses constructs. When I would be when the time there's two different experiences that I had in the astral. One was the very, very negative. They're both negative, but one was just sucking me out and beating the shit out of me. That was the most common, hundreds of those. But I was also have a few where I was taken to an astral realm, and they kind of, the dudes in robes, you'll hear this out there. It's just starting to come out on some bigger channels out there that are talking about this quote unquote recruiting process that they're doing. And so, they schmooze you and they flatter you and they tell you how you're chosen and how brilliant you are and you have special abilities and we're going to give you secrets and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I grew up in LA. Secrets are usually down a back alley and it smells like dead hookers and heroin. So I don't like secrets. And the last time I was astral kidnapped, I've been getting the shit beat out of me for 35 years. I don't really trust you guys either. Like, why are you violating me by pulling me out of my body? So they weren't flattering to me because I'd already had so many years of attack. I never want to leave my body again, ever. No, thank you. As a matter of fact, when I die, I'm not even leaving. My soul is not even leaving Earth when I die. Okay. I'm not going to a light. I'm not running towards Jesus in a meadow. Here is what I've told them. I've said to God, here's what's happening with me. I want Davidic covenant SWAT team to come down and literally escort me to the kingdom. And if I don't have Davidic paperwork, like I'm checking their credentials, right? You send someone, I'm testing that spirit. I'm asking them who they serve. I'm grilling them and I'm putting them through the test of the spirit. I want to see their paperwork because I ain't going with anybody except my Davidic SWAT team. I will haunt the local Applebee's before I will go with a random light or a happy meadow. Okay. I want my Davidic team and I want to check the paperwork before I go anywhere. That's how terrified and traumatized I am of this realm. And the one of the times when I was in a quote unquote happier astral realm, meaning I could see things, I could feel things. It was, a dimensional other world, if you will. It's much more like these happy astral projection people. Oh, there was, this temple and these walls, and go to the book. I explain it somewhat. And the guys in robes that were escorting me, they were trying to recruit me. And what they were trying to do was get me to go beyond a threshold of a gate. Now, what was interesting is previous to this experience, nobody who dragged me and beat the shit out of me in the astral, nobody that I ever confronted in the astral realms or the etheric realms or the multidimensional realms ever asked my permission for shit. I didn't have a choice. For the very first time at about, 35, 40 years old, I was given a choice to walk through that gate or not. And that struck me. And I went, whoa, wait. Why do I have a choice? And it sent up alarms. Because as soon as I hesitated and realized I had a choice, that hesitation made them panic. Because everything's like ESP up there, right? It's just instant understanding from brain to brain, if you will. And so it's embedded in you or impressed upon you. So I'm like, whoa, they're uncomfortable that I have a choice. Maybe I need to question this. And they got really agitated. And they're like, you need to hurry. And they started to get pushy. Not unlike a drug dealer trying to shove you down the alley. Like, let's go now, get in the car. And it was janky. It felt very back alley, hooker heroin LA to me. And I was like, I don't like this feeling. I know this feeling. It's pushy and nefarious and I don't like it. And so I started asking questions. Well, who are you guys? Why'd you come get me? Who are those guys that used to attack me? Do you know those guys? Are they part of your little clique here? Does your little group have a name? Why won't you let me read what's in the book over there? What's with the light temple? What's with the light in the middle? The diving in the light? What's with the light thing on the pedestal? They instantly scrambled my brain so that I couldn't think. It was almost like having a stroke while in the astral. And I couldn't think. And that's when I went, holy shit, I'm in trouble. And their flattery didn't work because I began to question. They needed my consent to get me through the gate. And I wasn't giving it to them. So they scrambled my brain so I would be confused. And they went back to attack mode. That's when I called on the Son of David. And what happened next? I don't say that Jesus scooped me out of the astral. I don't say that God scooped me out of the astral. I don't know who it was. Okay. They didn't introduce themselves. I couldn't see them because they came up from behind me. So we just say it was a member of the SWAT team of David. Okay. Like the extraction team, if you will, because there's a hierarchy working. So one of the ground crew on extraction protocol is now taking legal jurisdiction and pulling me out because I dialed the right number. Okay. And they yanked my ass like Negan throwing your ass into the back of a truck when you're standing in the middle of a zombie field. Okay. So I'm in The Walking Dead. Negan's truck comes driving by and just whoop and throws me in the truck. It was like that. And as soon as their presence locked into my energy field, if you will, what happens, and they grabbed me. My feet flew out in front of me like they yanked me. So it was almost like I was falling and they yanked me, but I didn't know I was falling at the time. But I felt that yank, like a parachute yank when it opens and you're boop, and my legs flew out. So it was strong. But what happened is even more interesting than that is what happened when they first came into my energy field was the entire astral temple construct world that I was standing in talking to these people instantly collapsed. It didn't glitch. It didn't glitch like a neon light slowly going out. This collapsed, gone, bam. Absolutely gone. And it was darker than dark and more silent than silent. And it's exactly the outer darkness explained in biblical text that at the time, as a kindergarten Christian running here to there and never thinking to read the Bible, I had no idea that outer darkness was even a thing. I thought, Christians teach heaven and hell. So I didn't have a schema for this, right? Because I'd never read the Bible before. So what I experience now that I've read the Bible and I've learned what outer darkness is and gone down that rabbit hole, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where I was. So what I'm telling you is presence collapses constructs. Why is this important? Well, because we're just studying Psalm 78. And we're looking at the ritual language in the Exodus and the plagues of Exodus. And how oftentimes, quote unquote, punishment or God's wrath in the Bible is framed as God is punishing. But the way I see it, and I believe the Greek backs me on this, especially when you get into the ritual language in many instances, and the Exodus is just one of them. When God shows up, things collapse. Does that make sense? Your false gods do not have jurisdictional authority. So if they're building a system in Egypt and like the frog lady's doing her thing and God shows up, frog lady's entire infrastructure instantly collapses because they don't have legal jurisdiction. There's an override there. Get it? God's presence collapses false kingdoms. Davidic covenant holders claim legal jurisdiction over things and gain back space. I hope I'm making any sense to you. So we've got two very different views and two very different overlays looking at biblical text. So we audit. We read, we study, but really we're doing an audit. And what Christians often do is think, how does this information from the Bible fit into my worldview? Right? And they're shoving the information into their worldview. I don't have that luxury because my worldview is fucking wonky, right? And so I ask the text, what is it? Just what does it say? What does it say? And what I started to learn was, oh my gosh, it doesn't say hell. And my experience wasn't hell. Oh my gosh, this book says outer darkness, and I saw outer darkness. Oh my gosh, this book collapses constructs, and I saw constructs collapse. Oh my gosh, this book talks about, and I saw that same thing. I'm constantly astonished at the things I've seen, the shit I've seen pop up in the Bible. I'm astonished that when I studied out Paul's journey to the third heaven, or whichever heaven he went to, that it's remarkably ritualized astral language. I'm like, astral attacks are biblical? Who knew? I was shocked when I read the ritual language in Exodus and Psalm 78 and in Acts 9, where they're sending out nighttime slaughtering spirits from Egypt. And I said, wait. Nighttime slaughtering spirits are the ones that attack you with sleep paralysis. Ding, ding, ding. That's a little interesting. In astral channels, in ritual occult that I learned, because I'm not learning it to do it. I'm learning it and studying it to see what the fuck happened to me, who did this to me, and how, so I can prevent it. Make sense? So I didn't study the occult because I was interested in doing occult. I was interested in the occult to find the guilty fucking parties. Like, who the fuck did this to me? And why? And so I know their secret ritual language. And when I start seeing these patterns in the Bible, I'm shocked. I'm still shocked to this day as I piece it together. So I'm looking at it instead of, how does these words fit with my worldview? I'm looking at it going, what does this say? And is my covenant in here? And you've got to audit the priesthood. And the priesthood is Rome and Babylon, guys. It's both of them, and it's the scholars. So many people audit Rome, and then they run to Babylon, and they don't audit Babylon. They lied too. And the scholars audit the hell out of those guys. Because what they're doing is they're using their scrolls to validate their own theology. They're using the Davidic covenant scrolls written for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And they're using those scrolls and hijacking them to validate their own theories, their own theology, their own emotions, their own feelings, their own belief systems. Where what I'm doing is I see the Bible as, that's not your mail to read. You're reading my mail. I'm in the Davidic covenant. This is written for lost sheep of the house of Israel who are in the Davidic covenant. Why are you reading my mail and telling me it says something else? Why are you reading my mail? Not only are you reading my mail, you're editing my mail and putting it back in my mailbox. Priesthood and scholars. If you're not in the Davidic covenant, why are you interested? Why are you reading my mail about the Davidic covenant and tampering with it? To hide my covenant, to hide my scroll, to hide my truth, and I'm pissed off about it. You see the difference? I'm looking for my covenant. They're looking to justify their theology and power. Two very different angles to come at it. I'm auditing the scrolls to build my theology because right now my only theology is I'm in the Davidic covenant. That's what it is. And if that covenant, if I find things in the text that contradicts, I'm chasing it down until I figure out why it contradicts. Because I want to walk in my covenant. So if I find out, for example, Oh, gee, Jesus isn't from a Virgin Mary. Okay, my love of the virgin narrative is not going to override my covenant. If I find Paul is false, kick him to the curb because I'm staying to my covenant. If I find the virgin birth is false, kick to the curb, I'm staying in my covenant. Find out that the rabbis freaking lied in Psalm 78, kick to the curb, I'm staying in my covenant. So I'm chasing down these edits, no matter how hard it is. When my belief system gets blasted out of that gets detonated, don't care, sticking to my covenant. If it's between covenant and what feels right, or what's easy, or what's emotional, or what challenges my belief systems, that goes out the window. Because I'm terrified to not be in my covenant. I want to get it right. I want to get it right. I want to get it right, at least for me. So I have an expansion mind rather than a proof mind. I see a lot of channels out there completely dedicated to proving Paul wrong. Great. Prove him wrong all day. But are you expanding to make sure you're in the right covenant? I'm going to give you an example of that. I'll see videos that say, we have proof that the virgin birth is an edit by, Rufinus and where Jerome or whoever did it. And they prove it. And they stay there. And they're trying to convince people that they're right because they're saving souls again, right? Don't believe this, believe that, because I'm saving souls and I want you to have the truth. That's, again, the earthly focus. Where I go to expansion is, okay, so we proved Paul wrong and false. What are the implications of that information? Because those implications hold my scroll. Those implications hold my covenant. So I'm not going to spend the rest of my life on Paul is false because I'm not going to find the right God by doing that. I need to go, okay, then we need to write down every single book that he wrote and understand his theology and make a list. And anytime these things pop into my head, because I've been brainwashed for so long, I got to get those out of my head and question it and go back to the text and figure it out. Knowing he's false and unwind that. And what's the implication of that information? The Virgin Mary's an edit. Okay, great. What's the implication of that? Well, Jesus came from somewhere. The implication of that is that he has a patriarchal bloodline. Let's look there. Nobody goes that far. Nobody's like, oh, patriarchal bloodline to David. Let's look at that. See what I mean? They stop at the proof. I'm going to prove I'm right. Scholars do the same thing, but they're not saying, okay, now that you've proved that you're right, what are the bigger implications of that expansion to find your covenant and the real God? Because throwing out Paul and not changing your jurisdiction, you're still out of legal authority. You can prove Paul wrong all day long. If you're not joining the new covenant, but with the implication of that is it's a different God that you've been following your whole entire life. I'm sorry for hurt your feelings. So get in a covenant with the right one. That's the implication. But you don't hear these channels doing that. Just Paul is false, Paul is false, Paul is false. But same God. Yeah, wait, what? Are you sure? Do you need to change any covenants surrounding that? Does that make sense? Well, it's still the Christian God. No, it isn't. Your God's different than the Christian God if you don't believe in Paul. How are you going to redo those covenants? How are you going to find your way back to David? How are you... Or another way that you find. But what does that mean? What are the implications of that spiritually? No one's asking that. No one's auditing on a covenant lens. I look at the Bible as my green box. At home, my green box has my passport in it. It has my tax refunds, your tax W-2 forms in it. It has, I don't get refunds, I wish. It's got, birth certificates, marriage, divorce paperwork, grandma's phone number, whatever, all the paper, Social Security stuff. All that's in the green box. The Bible is my green box. And I'm trying to get that information out beyond the edits and the lies of the priesthoods of Babylon on both sides. So I'm working, instead of calling it spiritual warfare, I'm doing grid tile flips. I'm out there on this grid, and I want you to imagine that each one of those grid squares that you see, those squares within the lights, each one of those is jurisdictional space. And that jurisdictional space either belongs to the kingdom of David or it belongs to false kingdoms made with astral contracts, false gods, false realms, false doctrines, false covenants that people don't even know they signed up for. Make sense? And here's what I'm doing. I'm not saving souls, I'm flipping grid. Your soul is between you and God. My job is to flip grid tiles. And I want to kind of illustrate it with this.
Eric, that is the 5th duel you have won tonight. Let's light up your floor. 29 pieces. Haley, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for playing.
My pleasure. Bye, guys.
Now, whether you've seen this game show before or not, this is exactly how legal jurisdiction works in the quantum grid realm that I was in, okay? So I want you to imagine you've got that green grid, right? And when you see the contestants, okay, I want you to imagine them as entities. Don't think of them as human beings right now, okay? These aren't our friends. Everyone on that grid is an entity with a false contract. They're a false god. They're demons, if you will. And they're vying for jurisdiction. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes they trade places. Sometimes they turn on each other. And then there's me. I'm little Kathy over there in the corner, surrounded by all of these entities. That's how I want you to watch this segment and see if this makes sense to you.
You've now inherited billionaires.
Yeah.
There is one more duel tonight, and you have such a big decision to make, whether to stay and play or go back to the floor. Let's see what your options are. You have billionaires to defend if you go back to the floor.
Here's what I'm thinking. I'm in the lead. I came here for 250, not 20.
Yep.
I say all that to say, if I get 6, I get 6. I'm going back to the floor.
All right, he's going back to the floor. Very hard choice either way. I mean, you could get lucky, Eric, but let's see. There's one more duel tonight. If the randomizer does not land next to you, you're gonna win $20,000. Activate the randomizer. Will Eric's hard work and gamble pay off? Or will he duel again in our last battle of the night against...
And there's me. There's me with all the other entities out there on the grid. Okay? There's me. And they're battling for jurisdiction.
Let's go! Kathy, you've been standing there a long
my gosh.
time.
I know what this side of your face looks like.
Hopefully it's my best side. We know what you're going to be playing.
He did not get to study,
He didn't.
and I didn't study because it was so far away for so long.
Yep,
So we're on even footing.
yep.
So let's do it.
Let's battle billionaires.
My fiance deserves.
All right. So they go through and they're answering questions and they're getting through the text. And let's see how it goes. See how the competition goes. And by the way, I would not have given Hasatan a high five. That wouldn't happen.
Pass.
Oh, God.
Pass. Pass. Walton. Pass. Guys, who are these people? Pass. And pass.
She didn't do a thing. Her presence carried jurisdictional override. If you listen to the videos that I've put up, and believe me, I've written to universities, I've written to channels to interview me, I've written to Monroe Institute people, like, hello, anybody want paranormal groups? Come study my EVPs, please, please come. It's repeatable. Everyone says, well, it's not scientific because it's not repeatable. I'll repeat it all day long. Come on over. Let me show you how I do it. Take my tapes, test them, study them. I'm not lying. Please. I ask sleep study people, study my brain, hook me up, tell me what's wrong with me. Nobody will answer me. Not one person will answer my request. Interview me, study me, hook my brain up, see what's going on. Test my EVPs. I challenge you. Nobody's called. They don't want the answer. But if you listen to those tapes carefully, and I've got hours and hours and hours of more footage, what you'll hear is I'm calm. I'm just there. I just say, remove, done, Davidic override, done. I'm not panicking because presence brings legal jurisdiction. If presence alone collapses jurisdiction, right? Imagine, and that's just a covenant bearer. I'm just a piss-on little covenant bearer that doesn't know shit about shit. Imagine, but I'm loyal to my covenant. Imagine what God's presence does when God walks in. And the chaos that would ensue. I would say it might look like the plagues of Egypt because they collapse when God shows up. She didn't do a thing except stood there in presence.
The David and Goliath. She comes out of nowhere.
Jackie just wants 20 grand.
For 30 pieces of the floor and $20,000. Let's light it up.
Oh my word.
Hey, good run, Eric. Eric, you have been a goat, my friend.
Yes.
A goat.
I'm going to miss you. Yes. Everybody, Eric, the goat.
It is a hard pill to swallow, but that's the game. I wish I could have broken the record. I wish I could have gotten the 20K, but I am happy.
You buy a lot of Chad Lowe posters on eBay with $20,000. You still have your category of murder mysteries.
I do.
And you have a huge decision to make. Do you stay and play or go back to your amazing amount of turf? But we are going to make that decision next time on the floor. There are 25 players left. Who will gain ground in the quest for a quarter?
All right. Who will gain ground? Gaining ground, guys, in this worldview isn't saving souls. It's more important for me to flip those grid tiles back to the Kingdom of David jurisdiction. Because if they can hear me exposing it, let me put it this way. If I pinged on their grid, and that's a whole nother video. If I pinged on their grid as a child to suck me into the astral, they knew I existed. And they attacked me for a reason. It wasn't random, okay? They attacked me for a reason. They could find me then. They know where I am now. And they can hear me. So every single time I expose a lie, an edit, a corruption of text, a false god, a false ritual, an occult ritual, I'm flipping that fucking grid tile and I'm taking back space. Now, eventually, I would imagine enough tiles get flipped, not by me alone. I'm sure there's other people out there flipping grid tiles. Okay? But that's where the battle is. If enough grid tiles get flipped, the 100th monkey effect takes place. I don't chase subscribers. I don't need subscribers. What I need is the motherfuckers who did this to my covenant to hear me as I flip that grid back, because I am collapsing kingdoms and squares as we speak. And soon, those frequencies, those truths will permeate the grid, and they'll start dropping onto people. Maybe people who are listening, maybe people who aren't. But when the grid flips, the frequency changes. Back to natural law, number one thing they use against the population, as above, so below. What happens in the spiritual realm or the dimensional realm is just a domino effect, and it's only a matter of time before it hits Earth. I'm flipping grid tiles. So because I'm working there, right, I have a very different perspective. I look at the implications of the information I'm digging out. I'm looking for my covenant and identifying breach points in that covenant. Places they major breach points, I'll give them to you. Jesus, major breach point. All kinds of lies about Jesus out there. King Jesus, he's the first one to go. Then we've got David. David is a major breach point, and lying about David is their second most favorite thing. Your next one is going to be Moses. Okay? Because you got to remember, the Babylonian priesthood came in and said, Moses said so. You have to do our laws. So Moses and the stories of Moses is another very big breach point. And you need to learn and understand the frequency within that covenant of those pillars. Jeremiah is a huge one to help you do that. Hosea is a huge one to help you do that. Elijah and Elijah, huge names to look at. Much more synced to the kingdom than Ezekiel. Make sense? Makes sense. But be careful for edits. Know the God you're talking about. Because these false gods are impersonators. They're lying about who they are. The people who serve them, i.e., priesthoods, whether it be Jewish rabbis or Christian preachers, anybody who's following the false gods or tricked by them are impersonating holiness, impersonating through emotion and belief, impersonating these false constructs. So I'm much more careful than most people because I know I'm on the floor and these entities are fighting for jurisdiction. And all they don't need to be valid when they have majority. See? They're still here because they have majority. That's the false god's name. So I ask who, how, and why. What rituals are they using? And what is the occult? Here is an example of a temple that, somebody might see in the astral. And then on the other side, we've got, these winged bat things. This is actually one of my experiences in a cloud with bats coming at me, these winged things. But there are about 1 million of them, and I was on my back getting sucked up into a vortex as they came down upon me. I was a little girl when this happened. So these are two contrasting things that you might see out there in the woo-woo world when they would come and grab me. The one in the middle is what people talk about with near-death experiences, right? They meet Jesus, there's a light, they get a big hug, and he sends them back to earth with some sort of over-emotional, life-changing wisdom that they can't really put into words. And it just sort of gets summed up with love more, okay? Which is fine. And I'm not going to dare say that they're not meeting Jesus. I don't know. That's not my place to judge. And I don't want to attribute experiences of people to, I don't want to say something that is, Jesus isn't. Okay? I don't know. It wasn't me. What I can tell you is I've been in the astral long enough to know that this exists. I've been in the astral enough times to know that that exists. If you don't think the enemy is constructing false Jesuses out there that's giving out hugs in the meadow, you got another thing coming. Do you think preachers are preparing Christians to discern the difference between those? I argue they're not. They can't tell the difference. They're working on belief and emotion. And boy, are they going to love bomb you in that middle scene. But you're really standing in that. There's one guy who did an NDE, and they interviewed him. And he talked about he got uncomfortable afterward. He had this, right? He had this, happy Jesus hugs. And then things started to go south. And he ended up in outer darkness. They don't like to publish that one. But there's several of those out there if you really start digging into these NDE experiences. I'm saying be careful. I'm saying the church is not preparing people to discern. I want you to imagine the outer darkness like this. Okay? All those little buildings that you see are false data, holographic, dimensional kingdoms, if you will, that you can go to. So if you want to be in the Happy Starseed Pleiades kingdom, well, you can go there. And you're going to be part of that kingdom. But where are you really? You're really in a false kingdom with outer darkness. And for a while, I don't know what happens to those people. Maybe they sit in there and they're happy. Their soul is happy sitting in there for a while. And they're emotionally sedated. But what happens when the presence of God or King David shows up and authorizes jurisdiction? And those immediately collapse, like that collapsing star you see, it just goes poof and bam, it's gone. What happens to the souls in that kingdom? I don't know. What happens to the souls in that kingdom? Likely, here's my guess, and I have reasons to believe this because I heard it on EVPs when I was doing sessions, but if a kingdom collapses, you've now got refugee souls that aren't part of a kingdom anymore, and they're in outer darkness, and they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They're very quickly realizing that they were in the wrong kingdom. Davidic covenant will come over and offer him another contract. Will they take it? How long will that take? Will they wander around trying to find another kingdom? Are they going to come back to earth and ghost people because they have nowhere to go? What happens if the people who have constructed the false kingdom decide, we don't want to do this one anymore, and they don't need your consent anymore. They don't need your yes. They don't need your energy anymore, and they just cast you aside. And now you're a spiritual refugee. What then? It's jurisdictional, not emotional. I don't have those answers. I do know. The kingdom of David the SWAT team of David has gone into places, and I've cleared space, and I have evidence on EVP of them offering contracts to souls to join the Davidic kingdom. I can tell you that. Whether that's true or not, whether you want to believe me or not, that's on you. I'm just telling you my experience. And I'm shocked that outer darkness is there. So all that I say to say this. Let's go back to this. What do I believe about the Tetragrammaton? Well, I don't believe in Moses said so. I like the documentary hypothesis to get some information and get a little extra piece for your framework. I do not ever use the name Yahweh or El. If you ever see it on one of my slide decks, it's probably because I put it into Google and they made me a slide and stuck it on there and I missed it. I do not use the name Yahweh and I do not use the name El. Nor do I believe either one of those are the name of Jesus's father. It could be. I'm not saying it isn't. It could be. I don't personally believe that. And my covenant doesn't run on belief. And then people go, oh, well, go to Jeremiah. He says the people forgot his name and now they're going to justify him anyways. Well, I have very low trust of the rabbis. I have very low trust of the church, and I have very low trust of the scholars. So I'll pull out nuggets to enhance my understanding, but I'm not going with their theology. Okay? When they come to me and start preaching theology like you have to do this, you're wrong, you're right, that's where I shut down. No. You ain't telling me it's Yahweh or else. Okay? Because there's a whole lot more information out there that says you're wrong. So I have very low trust and very high paranoia. Because I understand how to frequency scan and academic audit my covenant, I'm looking for my covenant. When I hear I am, and I understand the collapsing of astral kingdoms in front of me and yanking me out, why I showed you all this was to answer your question. I understand the collapse of kingdoms in other dimensions when Davidic jurisdiction shows up. So it doesn't surprise me that God would show up and say, I am what I am. Because when you run into that much power and authority out there in the woo-woo, that's exactly what it is. Team David doesn't operate on emotion and belief and ritual and names. Team David operates on it is what it is. Just presence of a covenant-backed entity, human, is all that needs to be said. Because when they show up, it is. They are. It's that much authority, and it blows my mind. Astral kingdoms collapse beneath them. I pull into covenant and I say, remove. That's it, remove. Oh, sounds like you guys fucked up. Like, I'm not battling with this emotion. It's very simple. Covenant jurisdiction collapses false kingdoms, evil entities, astral kingdoms. So when God says, I am, yeah, he is. And all of Team David is too. And I think until you confront that, people don't necessarily understand. So whether it's a name or not a name, I am not risking it that's a name, because I never want to attribute the works of God to a false entity. Won't do it. Rule number 1, do not worship false gods. Won't do it. Won't break my commandment of bearing false witness. Can't do it. Can't attribute something to God unless I'm sure it's God. Can't attribute something not God to not God unless I'm sure. Does that make sense? I will never call God a name. Not because it's a cult or whatever. That's that too. I'm very careful and paranoid when it comes to the occult. I'm not playing that game. Scared shitless. Not doing it. Not leaving my covenant. But because I'm not going to mess it up. And Jesus never used God's name. Called him dad. Called him father. So I call him Jesus' father. Actually, that's not true. Actually, I'm more paranoid than that. I call him, ready for this? I do a full roll call. I'm like, I'm praying and I want to talk to King Jesus, who is the son of David, the man of the Galilee, patriarchal bloodline to David, inheritor of all covenants, brother of James the Zedek, brother of Jude, like in the tradition of Elijah, like I roll call, dude, when I pray. I'm that specific. And people think I'm funny, but it's funny, but that's who I pray to. I pray to Jesus, patriarchal bloodline lineage to David, inheriting all covenants. That guy's God. That team. And just so we're clear, he was brother of James the Zedek. He was the son of Mary and Joseph. He was a brother of Jude. Sorry if I'm getting your names wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. That guy. That's whose God I want, and that's who I'm praying to. I want his father on Team David, in the house of David. The divine monarchy that has dominion over all. The only legal divine monarchy. That's my God. And that's how I call him, because I don't trust that the rabbis are calling that God. You think the rabbis are calling the same God? I mean, ask yourself this question. Is the rabbis God today, Yahweh? Do the rabbis call God Yahweh? Do the rabbis believe in Jesus as Father? Wrong guy. People that say Yeshua, you can say Yeshua all day long. No problem. It's like John versus Juan. I don't care. But if you're calling the light in the desert Yeshua, still the wrong guy. People believe that the name is important. I think I am is important. So I don't do it. I go with the David protocol. Where's my covenant, God? Show me how to walk. Clear this passage up for me. Help me read this in a way that's going to expose things to give me wisdom. Help me to learn your ways. Help me to learn your frequency. Help me to learn something today that blows one of my beliefs, my held beliefs out of the water, that's preventing me from walking better in my covenant. Show me your laws. Show me your precepts. That's Psalm 119. Read that. Do the David protocol. God, I'm a dipshit down here. I don't know what I'm doing. So download wisdom to me. Show me how to read this so that I find my covenant and I can walk better and more loyally in that covenant. That's what I do. Logos for every Rima. I would rather be standing there in the judgment seat in the court of Hasatan, right? And Hasatan's accusing me in court. And I'm in the court in the Mount Zion, which isn't Jerusalem temple, by the way. Mount Zion is the court, the courtroom of God. And so I'm in Mount Zion. And Hasatan's there in court. And he says, God, she didn't respect you because she never used your name. She didn't believe that Yahweh was your name, and it really was. And I'm going to say, well, I've got to get a logos for every Rima. So here's what I'm going to say. I would have rather called the way I do with my roll call, right? Jesus, son of David, blah, 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 blah. I would rather do that and be accurate than call you a name because I trusted other people. I never knew that Jesus called your name. From the information I had, Jesus didn't call your name. I'm following him. Jesus said, follow me. Not follow the rabbis, not follow the scholars, not follow the Christians, not follow some chick on YouTube, not follow some dude who wrote a book. Jesus said, follow me. And I did that to the best of my ability, and he didn't use God's name, so I didn't either. But what I did do was call roll for the God that I wanted. And Jesus is going to look at Hasatan and go, Dad, she's with me. I would rather have that answer than if I'm standing in front of Hasatan in court and he says, they called you Yahweh, and that's not the right name. That's some janky-ass storm god down there from the Arabian desert. What do you got to say about that? And my answer is, well, the rabbis said, and Jesus, Hasatan goes, did Jesus tell you to follow the rabbis? Oh, the rabbis that don't believe in Jesus. Those guys? The ones that wrote the Masoretic text 900 years later? Those guys? That's who you trusted? Wrong answer. Well, I trusted this guy on YouTube who went and really dug deep into this academic thing about it, and they pieced together the history and the archaeology, and didn't hear Jesus in that answer either. Hasatan's going to say, didn't follow the king. But Jeremiah said, didn't follow the king. The king never used his name. I don't use his name. So although it's interesting, I honestly don't care. I don't care. If God has a name, he'll tell me when I get there. Until then, I'm way too paranoid to play. I guess that's my answer. Because the people who say it's Yahweh are the same people who came back from Babylon and said, God said so. Moses said so, follow our laws. And jankified Moses. So I don't trust him. I don't trust him. I don't know why people do. So low trust, high paranoia. I don't play the name game. Jesus said, Facebook? No, I literally want you to follow me. Oh, so Twitter. Okay, I'm going to start this over again and see where I lost you. So I am is Yahweh, right? But what if it isn't? What if it isn't? What if it's not? What if they lied? Like, then what? In what I know of the astral kingdom and what's evil out there, the risk versus reward, dude, I'm just not going to give an answer to that question because I don't know. And I don't trust anyone to tell me because they haven't told me the truth yet. And I've been severely punished for that. I see the other end of the stick and I don't want to be there. If calling Yahweh puts me out of my covenant, I'm not interested. That's my number one goal. And it may or it may not. I may call on Yahweh and it doesn't breach my covenant. But if it does, because that's a false god, I'm not risking it. Does that make sense? I'm too paranoid and too low trust after 40 years of this. Because I don't trust Roman Babylon. I don't trust Islamic Babylon. I don't trust Masoretic Babylon. Because they all link back to mystery Babylon, which I believe is Egypt. It all goes back to the eye thing, and the eye of Horus, and the eye of Amun-Re, in the logo. They say all the roads lead to Rome. That's a distraction. All roads lead to Egypt. And the infrastructure of the ancient Egypt cosmology is the ritual infrastructure that the ancient Israelites who went out of covenant stood upon, who the Levitical priesthood stands upon, who the modern rabbis stand upon, who every secret society and occult organization stands upon. It's who the Romans stand upon, and probably Islamic Babylon stands upon. It's Egyptian occult ritual infrastructure. And I'm afraid of it. That's my answer. And the lost sheep should be afraid of it too. So there's that. That's my answer. And I'm sticking to it. I don't want to be in outer darkness. Outer darkness you can see in 2 Peter 17. And he puts outer darkness and the doctrine of Balaam together. And what the doctrine of Balaam is that spirit of compromise. Yes, with greed and wealth, but it's really seduction and compromise into this belief. Just believe this and you're okay. Or just say that. Just do this. Ritual rather than covenant. Matthew is actually a really highly ritualized text. And he talks about outer darkness 3 different times. One, when the sons of Abraham don't get in simply because of their lineage. Another, when he's throwing out the rotten servant. And another one, when the dude gets kicked out of the wedding for having the wrong clothes on. He didn't have the right passport. He was in the wrong kingdom jurisdiction, gets thrown out of the wedding for not having the right clothes on. Wrong jurisdiction. Jude also talks about outer darkness, and he relates it with Balaam. And Jesus brings up Balaam in Revelation about the eating food sacrificed to idols piece. It's not a spirit of compromise. But I think the really interesting one that I wanted to share today was Jude. I hate just reading a piece, guys, but, sometimes we have to. We're talking about arguing and fighting. Even the Archangel Michael, when he argued with the devil and fought over the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a slanderous accusation against him. Instead, he said, "May the Lord rebuke you." Whatever these people do not understand, they slander. Like irrational animals. They are destroyed by the very things they know by instinct. How terrible it will be for them. For they lived like Cain, rushed headlong into Balaam's error. It's the error of being seduced into compromise to make a profit. and destroyed themselves. Also in Korah's rebellion. These people are stains on your love feasts. They feast with you without any sense of awe. They're shepherds who care only for themselves. They're waterless clouds blown about the winds. They're autumn trees that are fruitless, dead, and uprooted. They're wild waves of the sea. That's their chaos. Turning up the foam of their own shame. And they're wandering stars from whom the deepest darkness has been reserved forever. Why are they in the deepest darkness? Because they rushed into Balaam's error. Okay? They're shepherds who care only for themselves. Work out your faith and your beliefs on your own. Don't trust me. Don't trust another channel. Don't trust books. Don't trust scholars. Don't trust those rabbis. And don't trust that priesthood. Because they're shepherds who only care for themselves. And geez, don't trust the scholars. The scholars are going to give you information, not theology. The rabbis give you information, not theology. The priesthood might give you information, not theology. There's a big difference there. And so be very, very careful not to rush headlong into Balaam's error and simply follow the king. Because wrong contracts, wrong jurisdiction means outer darkness. Because you're in the wrong kingdom. People don't like that answer. They really don't like that answer. They really don't like that answer. But I tell you what, I fear God. Well, I respect God, right? I fear God. I fear the consequences of being wrong. Because these people are involved in rituals. Blood rituals, which includes human sacrifice, bloodline warfare, gifts to the gods, or covenant markers. When James talks about strangulation, that has to deal with it. The rituals deal with temple and sex rituals, temple prostitution, fertility rites, incense, food, and smoke offerings, smell offerings. They do sovereignty theater as ritual, which is anointing people with oil, casting lots, divination, plagues as ritual collapse with the presence of God. They do binding and containment rituals, the red thread over Rachel's tomb, vows, oaths, and spoken contracts. This one right here, your vows, oaths, and spoken contracts, that's where the name comes in. And it's dangerous. They also use fasting as a covenant gateway. They use astral invocation and name magic. You know that, how the occult. It's with Solomonic hierarchy, breath work, spirit transfer, and invoking names. So no, I don't trust that it's Yahweh. I don't even trust that the God they say is whatever it is the real God. I don't believe that their God is the real God. And they just missed it. I don't believe that narrative. I don't trust them. So that's my answer. That's my answer. And if I have to sit here and roll call before I start to pray, so be it. I'm going to be careful. Because these entities, they masquerade. They do identity masquerades so they can gain jurisdiction on the floor. The grid, dimensional enforcement, is legal. It's not emotional. It's not ritual. It's not intellectual. And people don't like these answers. They want to go to scholars and rabbis and priests because they feel out of control because they're not getting the answer. They want the answer. They really want to follow God and follow the right God and know that they're in the right place. And Jesus warns about that when he talks to the Babylonian priesthood and says, you know, you're not only are you don't know God, but you're steering people away who really want to know him. You're steering them away. Millstone, millstone, millstone. It kind of gets people stuck in this Protestant rightism, like I have to be right and you have to be wrong. There is something that's right. There's an absolute truth. Someone's got to be wrong. You're not all right. Okay? You got to take a gamble. Sorry, you have to. And most people are very comfortable thinking that they're right and riding on that ease of belief. As long as I believe the right things and believe harder, I'm good. I'm here to tell you that didn't work for me. And this is where you get the arguing about who's right and who's wrong. Jesus is right and everybody else is wrong. David's right and everybody else is wrong. That covenant is right. And the reason it's right is because it's the only divine monarchy that's valid. It's not very academic. It's not very believism. It's certainly not a ticket to heaven worldview. But heed Jesus' warning about going to people who aren't in the right covenant themselves or aren't in the covenant you want to be and taking their advice. And I guess I hope I answered your question. Have a good day. Thank you.